Karen is asking, why is Jeff obsessed with children's genitals? I'm obsessed with children's well-being and protecting them from the sexual butchery going on all over Canada. This is a reference to a sign that I held at a protest, showed one of the victims of this. There are no children's genitals in that picture. Maxime Bernier tweeted out one of these pictures. If it were child porn, then it wouldn't be allowed on Twitter, but I'll bet you that saved at least one child from suffering the same fate. They're out there celebrating the sexual butchery of kids, and so I just went out there and did what they were doing. They're systematically sexually confusing these children, leading to the most egregious harms of our children that we've ever seen in this country. And if you just left the kids out of it, I wouldn't be there. There's a balancing of harms that needs to take place. I'm choosing the least harmful option with these disturbing pictures because look at what they're doing to the kids. Go ahead and look. And I have a troll. He says, hey, Jeff, why did you flail around a sign with an image you yourself describe as child porn? I've never described it as child porn. These are surgical outcomes. These are the detransitioners posting pictures of themselves on Twitter. Earl Lampert, he says, why did you bring child porn? Is that a protest to you? So if you see porn in this picture, then there's something wrong with you. This is a child whose abdomen has been completely mutilated. There are no reproductive organs whatsoever. These are the people who were banned from Reddit, children who've been butchered in for a lifetime of suffering. It needs to stop. No more willful blindness. People need to see what is happening to these kids. He's saying that I'm a filthy pedophile, and that is projection, obviously. You need to mock the tyrants. You need to shame them. That's what they're lacking, obviously, is shame. They're really celebrating the sexual butchering of children. No more willful blindness. If they're disturbed for a minute, for a day, for a week, or a year, that is a less harmful outcome than having one of these children go through with this and regret it. And many, many, many of them are. And the gender affirming care is the model that was adopted after Bill C-16 was passed back in 2015. And the legal age of consent in Ontario is 12. There's no hate in my heart. I love what's behind me, not hate what's in front of me. That's who we are as Canadians. Deanna saying, you're disgusting. How did you even get access to child pornography to share? A bunch of groomers. So it's not child pornography. It's allowed on Twitter. These are surgical outcomes that we're showing. If you see something sexual in that picture, there is something wrong with you. Michelle is saying pictures used in a medical context are legal and not porn. Sorry, that's Michael. I said Michelle, my bad. Thanks very much, man. I appreciate the support. I'm glad that people are really waking up to this. We've never seen such egregious exploitation and harm done to our children in Canada. I'll throw to another troll here. They're saying, why are you so obsessed with children's genitalia? This is one of those cases of confession through projection. It's not my side that is obsessed with children's genitals. It is the people who are grooming them for this sexual butchering. If I'm obsessed with anything, it's with child safety, child well-being, child happiness, and lifespan. Most of the children who initially identify as gender dysphoric, it eventually desists. So here's the National Library of Medicine. Only 2.5 to 20% of all cases of gender identity disorder in children and adolescents are the initial manifestation of irreversible transsexualism. So that's an 80 to 97% rate of desistance. Gender identity at follow-up, of the 193 participants, 17 or 12% were classified as persisters, and the remaining 122, 88%, were classified as desisters. So that's an 88% rate of desistance. Psychosexual outcome of gender dysphoric children. At follow-up, 30% of 77 participants, 19 boys and 4 girls, did not respond to our recruiting letter or were not traceable. 27%, 12 boys and 9 girls, were still gender dysphoric. And 43% desistance group, 28 boys and 5 girls, were no longer gender dysphoric. Both boys and girls in the persistence group were more extremely cross-gendered in behavior and feelings and were more likely to fulfill gender identity disorder criteria in childhood than the children in the other two groups. At follow-up, nearly all male and female participants in the persistence group reported having homosexual or bisexual orientation. In the desistance group, all of the girls and half of the boys reported having heterosexual orientation. The other half of the boys in the desistance group had a homosexual or bisexual orientation. So a lot of this is sexual orientation. Conclusions. Most children with gender dysphoria will not remain gender dysphoric after puberty. Children with persistent gender identity disorder are characterized by more extreme gender dysphoria in childhood than children with desisting gender dysphoria. With regard to sexual orientation, the most likely outcome of childhood gender identity disorder is homosexuality or bisexuality. So these are groups that probably need protecting and they're being exploited. This is the standards of care for the health of transsexual, transgender, and gender nonconforming people. And this is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. Differences between children and adolescents with gender dysphoria. An important difference between gender dysphoric children and adolescents is in the proportion for whom dysphoria persists into adulthood. Gender dysphoria during childhood does not inevitably continue into adulthood. Rather, on follow-up studies of prepubertal children, mainly boys, who were referred to clinics for assessments of gender dysphoria, the dysphoria persisted into adulthood for only 6 to 23% of children. Boys in these studies were most likely to identify as gay in adulthood than as transgender. Newer studies, also including girls, showed a 12 to 27% rate of gender dysphoria into adulthood. This is long-term follow-up of transsexual persons undergoing sex reassignment surgery, cohort study in Sweden. Table 2 describes the risks for selected outcomes during follow-up among sex reassigned persons compared to same age controls of the same birth sex. Sex reassigned transsexual persons of both genders had approximately a 3 times higher risk of all-cause mortality than controls, also after adjustment for co-varieties. You triple your risk of dying when you go through the sex reassignment surgery. Table 2 separately lists the outcomes depending on when sex reassignment was performed during the period of 1973 to 1988 or 1989 to 2003. Even though the overall mortality was increased across both time periods, it did not reach statistical significance for the period of 1989 to 2003. The Kaplan-Meier curve, figure 1, suggests that survival of transsexual persons started to diverge from that of matched controls after about 10 years of follow-up. The cause-specific mortality from suicide was much higher in sex-reassigned persons compared to matched controls. Mortality due to cardiovascular disease was moderately increased among the sex-reassigned, whereas numerically increased risk for malignancies was borderline statistically significant. The malignancies were lung cancer, tongue cancer, pharyngeal cancer, pancreas cancer, liver cancer, and unknown origin. And this is any cause of death matched on sex at birth. So this is the normal mortality curve without any sex reassignment for males in dark, females in gray. And then we have the dashed lines. Colors are the same. So 10 years after the surgery, they start dying off like crazy. Females don't start dying as much as males right away. I think I could reasonably speculate that that is attributable to suicide, at least in some statistically significant way. Males do have a much higher rate of suicide than females do in all age brackets. They catch up after about 25 to 27 years after the surgery. So almost everybody dying off, the further out you go. So these are atrocious outcomes. So a follow-up study on 10 feminine boys. Abstract. 10 subjects who exhibited feminine behavior and cross-dressing as young boys are described. At follow-up, 8 to 10 years later, 4 are heterosexual, 2 are homosexual, and 1 is transsexual. And the outcome is uncertain in 3. Of the 8 who met DSM-3 criteria when evaluated, 3 are heterosexual, 2 are homosexual, 1 is transsexual, and the outcome is uncertain for 2. Gender dysphoria appears to be a necessary but not sufficient factor in a transsexual outcome. The strength, rigidity, and persistence of cross-gender behavior through latency may be a good predictor of transsexual outcome. Okay, so again, high rates of desistance. A follow-up study of girls with gender identity disorder. At follow-up, 3 participants, or 12%, were judged to have gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria. That's an 88% rate of desistance. Here's Mackenzie Dale calling me a coward. I'm a 2-time war veteran, you piece of shit. This guy likes butchering kids. You're the guy that needs to hide behind a fake profile, and I'm out here using my real name. So who's really the coward here, Dale? He promotes the sexual butchery of children. They love sexually butchering children and destroying health and lives and happiness. These evil, sick freaks need to be stopped. And Mackenzie is saying that I'm a child predator. I'm not promoting the sexual butchery of children the way that you people do. That's confession through projection. That's how the evil mind works, folks is it just projects all of its own evil onto the rest of us. That's why tyrants are always accusing us of what they themselves are guilty. There is a tweet violating our rules against gratuitous gore. It's not child porn, it's gratuitous gore. That kind of makes my point for me.